All right, welcome. I see we've got some folks in the chat already joining us. So to kick things off, my name is Annalisa. I am the newest member here at Atrium, working on socials and community. And I'm really excited for today's event. The topic is Unichain and DeFi, scaling with purpose. We've got here Derek from Growth Lead at Unichain, to be exact. And today we're going to be exploring what it takes to grow a purpose-built DeFi chain and how builders can leverage next-gen infra. So the way this session is going to go today is Derek, well, I'll let you also handle your own intros as well, but Derek's going to go through a presentation. I've got some questions for him, so we'll do light Q&A, but for those who are in the audience, whether you're on YouTube or on Twitter or X, feel free to hit the chat and we'll be able to address hopefully all of your questions today. So, well, to kick things off, Derek, I'd love to hear from you about a little bit more about your background, what you do at Unichain, and what brought you to Unichain to begin with. So we'll start there.
Definitely. Thanks, Teresa. Hi, everyone. Great to meet. I'm Derek. Been at Uniswap Labs for a few months now, leading growth for Unichain on the BD team. Before Uniswap was, I think, number 6 or 7 on the team at Variant, which is one of the premier early-stage VC funds in crypto. So joined as an early-stage investor on the team there, where I mostly focused on like seed-stage DeFi, but did deals from like the earliest stages all the way up to the latest. Uniswap was one of our major portcos and really enjoyed working with them. Got to the point where I was really excited to try out an operator role. So I've been in touch with the team for a bit and was pumped at the opportunity to join the team here, and was always really excited about the idea of Unichain from even some of my earliest days at Variant. So was pumped to have the opportunity to lead growth for it.
Awesome. And I know that especially with your background working in VC, you'll have a lot of great advice for builders that are either in UHI cohort 7 or any previous cohorts. Anyone who's tuning in right now, yeah, definitely you've got some good advice to come. But I know you put together a presentation to walk through Unichain, so I will go ahead and hand you the floor, and we can, not me, we can go ahead and get things started.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I've been really excited for the session today. I wanted to start off with a high level, just really short 10-15 introduction of Unichain, giving an idea of what the vision is, how we're accomplishing it, and current state of the builder community, and then really keep this session very conversational, open it up to a lot of Q&A at the end. With that, I'll dive into Unichain. So what's zooming out the high level problem that we're trying to solve? If you look across most chains and L2s, the vast majority of on-chain activity is really DEX trading. I mean, Uniswap v3 is one of the most gas-consuming contracts on mainnet, similar for other Uniswap deployments and a lot of other L2s, even other DEXs besides Uniswap. But interestingly, there was no chain that really worked backwards from the needs of traders and designed the developer platform from there. And I would say this is very distinct from kind of like a Hyperliquid style app chain, which starts with like trading app and then designs a chain around that. We'll get into details at the end, but Unichain, well, Uniswap holds very much like a forefront position, is by no means a chain that's like purely designed for Uniswap itself. It's really meant to be a bigger ecosystem from that. And getting into like what are the problems and what do traders really care about, I would argue it's primarily 3 things. Speed, trading needs to be fast, especially with how like volatile and violent market moves in crypto can be. You need to be able to execute trades very quickly. Fees, trading needs to be cheap. In times of high network congestion, you can't be dealing with multi-dollar gas fees, especially if you just comp this to the experience trading on a centralized exchange, which like ultimately what's the goal of DEXs and DeFi? It's really to overtake centralized exchange dominance. You're not dealing with any gas fees on their server, so we need to make those as low as possible. And then lastly, and very interestingly, this is an area that I think we've leaned into honestly more than a lot of other chains, is MEV. So trading needs to be fair. You can't be worried about getting sandwiched, getting front run. You need to make sure that when you express an intent to trade, X for Y, it happens in like a successful transaction and around the price that you're quoted when you go to place that trade. So I wanted to like dive a little deeper into each of these points and just kind of get an idea of like the landscape of the market and kind of current state of the problem. So for speed, trading needs to be fast. If you look at block times on Ethereum, you're dealing with 12 seconds, which in a time of like a very violent market move in crypto, just isn't very realistic. I mean, it definitely works for people that are very concerned about decentralization, security, and want to just kind of like hold large balances and deal with kind of like longer buy and hold trades. But for higher frequency, higher performance trading, 12 seconds simply just won't cut it. If you move to L2s, the picture gets a lot better. I mean, you go from like 12 to 2 seconds. If you move from Ethereum Optimism, Arbitrum is a little bit lower. Solana is around half a second. But if you comp this to any centralized exchange, notably Binance, trade settlement is usually around 100 milliseconds, 0.1 seconds. So the difference between that and Solana is on the magnitude of 5x. So even that is quite significant. And I would argue things definitely get a little marginal when you're dealing with like 0.2 versus 0.1 seconds. But it's very important that like trade settlement happens extremely quickly. So what else do traders care about? Fees. Trading needs to be cheap. I would say there's two important dimensions of this. One is definitely fees, but the other is just general variability. So I mean, I'm sure we all remember the like 2021 days with pretty exorbitant gas fees on mainnet during kind of like the market craziness of that period. But even after a lot of the gas optimization initiatives for core mainnet L1, you're still dealing with like a pretty high degree of variability. I mean, even during some of the high market activity in 23, I mean, I pulled up this picture just in terms of Ethereum gas fees, price in Gwei. You see like a lot of variability if there's any pretty violent market moves. And importantly, on those days, you're obviously dealing with like a really cost prohibitive, expensive gas fees, and compared to trading on a centralized exchange where you're paying zero, we dramatically needed to lower that fee. And then lastly, MEV. I think a lot of people underestimate the magnitude of how serious MEV is for a lot of kind of like casual consumer traders and LPs. Hard to calculate exactly like losses from sandwiching, front running. Those calculations are quite complex. One number that I really like that I think speaks to the magnitude of the problem is from our friends at Srella Labs, and it's like total LP losses to arbitrage since the merge. This is kind of broadly in the concept of lever LVR, if people are familiar. And you're almost dealing with 200 million in terms of LP losses. And once again, putting this number in perspective, I think total DEX TVL on mainnet right now is something on the order of like 8 to 10 billion. So if you think about this over the course of 2 or 3 years, it's like a pretty meaningful loss. So like a big priority when we were going to design Unichain is how do we prevent anything like this from happening, both on the LP and the trader side. So getting into how we went about solving these problems from a technical perspective, we really look to take some of kind of like the latest and greatest in L2 tech and design a chain that specifically addresses these major pain points for traders. So on the speed front, we collaborated pretty closely with Flashbots on one of their newer products called Flash Blocks. So Flash Blocks uses partial block confirmations or pre-confirmations. And a simple mental model is you kind of take one core L2 block and break it into multiple pieces. And then you have like a pre-confirmation that each of those partial blocks has some sort of like settlement or finality. And then second, on fees, we use OP Stack, kind of state-of-the-art L2 stack, along with a lot of our own kind of like customizations on gas optimization to try to make fees some of the lowest in market. That was really our goal. And then lastly, on MEV, we had another collaboration with Flashbots on another product called Rollup Boost, which is the first TE-based block builder for L2s. So this is a private encrypted mempool where, like, typically how do MEV attacks happen? A searcher is looking at a public mempool that has all different kinds of transactions, and then you spot a large trade, use priority fees to get either a transaction before it or a transaction before and after. But with an encrypted mempool, searchers can't look at that kind of activity and can't see like what trades are actually being placed in the mempool. So you can still think in like probabilistic terms and like, there doesn't eliminate the problem completely, but reduces kind of like the low lift, easy way to identify potential MEV attacks that, like I described in the magnitude before, are really at the detriment of a lot of traders and LPs on major chains in crypto. So what do results look like? I mentioned on the previous slide, but block times we have down to about 200 milliseconds. That, as far as I'm aware, compared to most major L2s and L1s, is the fastest in market today. It's faster than Solana. For gas fees, we're usually around a cent, sometimes even lower. We have a lot of technical roadmap items that are working to get this fee as low as possible. And internally, we're also thinking of, are there potential things that we can explore in terms of gas sponsorship? Like, are long-term goal is to have gas fees basically near zero on Unichain. And then on MEV, quite difficult to track and calculate, like I mentioned before, but like the main indicator and tracking that we have is looking at some interesting data that Blockworks collects on like total bot activity versus a lot of other major players on chains and L2s. Unichain has largely trended down in terms of bot activity, and compared to some of our peer L2s, it's typically a bit lower. And we see this as like a big indicator of MEV because bots are effectively searchers, and they're the ones executing a lot of transactions and attacks to try to like extract value from some of the trades in LPs. And then in terms of traction, important to kind of supersede all this with Unichain is one of the youngest major L2s by far. We're less than 10 months old, basically. Mainnet only went live on February, and then we kind of had like the initial go-to-market really go out sometime around April. But in that time, we've seen about 71 billion in total DEX volume, making Uniswap on Unichain one of the largest deployments across like all L2s. Peak TVL was around 900 million. Importantly, like we recently started winding down incentives, and right now they're pretty much removed for all major pools. And the main kind of like guardrail metric that we were looking at is what are daily transactions like, and those interestingly have not fallen really at all. I mean, they've been quite stable the past few months. There was obviously like the blip over the summer that was largely due to like large market moves, a lot more trading activity across the board. But benchmarking across a lot of other L2s, daily transactions are like relatively consistent, which we see as kind of like phase one of Unichain being quite sticky in terms of generating like a lot of on-chain activity. And then I think it's important to step back and think, we're like first and foremost an L2 designed for trading activity, but why should developers care if you're not building like a DEX or anything touching trading? And it's because we like isolating trading because it creates a very powerful liquidity flywheel. And the simple mental model I have for Unichain is like Uniswap protocol is kind of at the center. Like I said, this is also other DEXs, but right now the DEX activity is really around Uniswap. And there's this three-sided marketplace between swappers and users, LPs, developers, and they all interact in really, really interesting ways. So for example, with swappers and developers create new products, and the swappers and users on Unichain that are sometimes coming through like the Uniswap app, for example, because Unichain is featured quite prominently for the initial distribution and the initial users and distribution to those developers. And then in terms of developers and LPs provide early liquidity to new products. Developers can innovate on liquidity primarily using like V4 hooks or other more kind of like customized liquidity solutions like that to provide like really good, well-priced, highly efficient liquidity for specific token niches. So like one area that we've seen a lot of activity is like lever mitigation hooks, back to the point before, where if you're dealing with like any token that sees a lot of arbitrage, you can prevent that using like dynamic fees, batch auctions, multiple mechanisms to prevent some of the value leakage to arbitrageurs and searchers. And then for LPs and swappers, like LPs bring more liquidity, they can list more tokens on Unichain, and then the swappers and users are the ones interacting with protocols, primarily DEXs, to generate yield for the LPs. And this is really interesting to think kind of like even one step further out in terms of what are the second order effects you can play with here. There's a lot of really interesting things in terms of like yield, other kinds of trading activity, tokenized strategies, like really interesting ways that you can kind of like build on top of this new liquidity playground that we think of as like kind of like a trading first L2, but not necessarily an app chain. And then what does the ecosystem look like right now? Unichain is only around 10 months old, but has a pretty large DeFi builder community compared to a lot of other L2s. So we have most major DeFi apps deployed on Unichain right now. So on the lending side, Morpho, the second largest lending protocol, along with Euler, Compound. Swaps, I actually think, is one of the most interesting categories. Because obviously, as I started out before, we're like a trading first L2 where Uniswap is a prominent position, but Unichain is not an app chain. So Curve recently deployed, which, in most parts of the business is a competitor for Uniswap. And very interesting, like Velodrome is live, and they're actually one of the fastest growing projects on Unichain. And the position, of myself and the Unichain team is quite supportive of that. I mean, like I said, we're supposed to provide neutral infrastructure that anyone can build on top of. Uniswap will hold definitely a prominent position, especially in terms of how some of like Uniswap on Unichain is marketed through some of our apps and other channels. But if Velodrome wants to come to Unichain along with any other DEX, we're perfectly happy for that to happen. I mean, it really is just one of the best L2s for trading activity from a technical perspective. And then we also have a lot of interesting liquidity launchpad protocols. Like Uniderp is a fun native project there. like Doppler's live on Unichain. Uniswap's recent like liquidity auction mechanism, CCAs, is live on Unichain as well. And once again, being a trading chain, a lot of focus is on the swap vertical. We've seen quite a bit of growth there. And lastly, on yield, have most major curators for Morpho vaults and other kind of yield protocols, like Gauntlet notably has a decent amount of TVL being curated on Unichain, and then Spark is live along with a few other major yield protocols. So what's up next? This is why I was excited to present in front of you all today. I think this was largely phase one of Unichain. It hasn't even been a year. Goal was really grow initial liquidity, have most of the major like apps deploy on Unichain. And the goal from here is really to have native builders build and compose with some of these protocols, but on top of this liquidity, like really lean into what makes Unichain unique and design kind of very new apps that kind of push the boundary in terms of DeFi mech design and activity. And I would say with that, like we're building out a lot of the ecosystem function here. That's my biggest priority going into Q1 of next year, looking to partner with a lot of mission aligned builders and really want to make sure that there's like a small cohort of builders on Unichain that feel like they're extremely well supported from the labs perspective. So we're definitely like gearing up that function. It's very new for Uniswap Labs going into Q1 and Q2 of next year. So yeah, I mean, that's the end of the presentation. I have my contact info here if people want to reach out over email, over Twitter, and then was going to open it up to questions, Teresa.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing. It was really great. I mean, I personally learned a lot about Unichain and how y'all operate, but I do have, I mean, as you saw, I do have a laundry list of questions, but I'll try and get to the bulk of them, especially just like how it pertains to a lot of the builders and the audience that are building on Uniswap v4. But just to start to backtrack a little bit, I know that like DeFi builders often face like a bootstrapping liquidity challenge. So sometimes providing incentives might work short term, but what advice do you have for builders like when it comes to retaining liquidity after rewards might dry up, especially early stage builders?
Yeah. I mean, it's a very difficult problem, I think.
Yeah.
Once again, I saw a lot of this from the variant perspective as a VC. First and foremost, you need to lean into product differentiation. Like ideally, net of incentives, the product should stand on its own 2 feet and be fine long term. Incentives are very much kind of like a short-term bootstrapping mechanism, something to attract initial users. But if you're not kind of going towards something that offers like competitive yield long term, you are just going to be kind of like constantly playing catch up on the incentive game, spending a lot of your own treasury, requesting a lot from ecosystems. So like really it needs to be first and foremost a yield innovation from like the product protocol perspective.
Yeah, awesome. And then my other question is like, I know we've seen, well, especially last year, we saw the meme coin boom, which is like a huge phase. But now there's, I mean, especially with Base and Zora, there's a lot of buzz around like creator coins and micro markets. So what do you think about like the value of small, like thinly liquid markets?
Yeah. We're happy to have them on Unichain. I mean, like once again, we kind of like designed a project that can welcome in a lot of that activity. Some of it is happening through some of those launch pads. So I mean, once again, we're a neutral infrastructure provider. We're fine to have it. I wouldn't say it's like a primary focus out of the labs perspective. Just because looking at a lot of that activity on other chains, it's like somewhat ephemeral, quite volatile. I think we want to lean into things that like are very long-term aligned in terms of like major protocol tokens, like RWAs are an interesting category that we're looking into a lot. Things that are like very sustainable and long-term in terms of token demand.
Yeah, awesome. No, that actually answers probably one of my questions that I have later. So that's very helpful. I did want to pull this question from the audience because I do think this is very relevant. But if you can elaborate more on the mission-aligned cohort of founders and what can builders expect from Uniswap Labs in terms of support?
Totally. Starting with mission aligned, really looking for people that are like long-term aligned with Uniswap and just kind of building something in crypto, not really looking for something that's, you know, kind of like a year-long project, but really potentially like their life's work, something that they're really keen to focus on and execute on for the next few years of their life. I very much applying like kind of a VC lens to that. I want these to be like, you know, very strong projects that stand on their own 2 feet. In terms of support you can expect from labs, I mean, I would really say this is the first time that we're building out like a big builder community support function. So like a bare minimum is a lot of go-to-market marketing support, both in terms of like strategic advice on the strategy front, from like our amazing marketing team, which is one of the top ones in crypto and specifically DeFi, but also just a lot of help on distribution in terms of like co-marketing initiatives together. Grants will definitely be a piece of this as well. I mean, I would really say it's like we're kind of open ears in terms of what support people want as this function is being built in real time. But the two main prongs initially are going to be like a lot of go-to-market support on kind of like the strategy, and then also tactical perspective, helping with distribution. And second, a grant component most likely.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. So, I mean, for my questions, I mean, from your perspective, especially with your background in VC, what do you think makes a great protocol founder, like especially in Unichain?
Yeah, great question. I think like there are two qualities that I always really looked for at Varian. I think one is somebody that's like a tenacity for thinking through like interesting ideas, is kind of like relentless in terms of not being satisfied with doing something that's like skeuomorphic, if that makes sense. So somebody that's like very generative, creative, always thinks big, tries to do things that are like kind of truly net new, non-skeuomorphic. One big quality. And the second is I mean, definitely something I kind of realized going from VC to operating, but there's a million things you could be doing at any given moment. I think one of the most important qualities of the best founders I saw at Varian was just extreme focus, having like a kind of like a very narrow vertical that you're extremely focused on, not getting distracted with other things that like might be hot or clouding the timeline on Twitter in like a given day or a given week. Just have like a very thorough built out strategy that you're laser focused on executing on.
Yeah,
I think those two qualities make killer founders.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, then like when you are, or as you are connecting with founders, like through Unichain, what part of like the GTM strategy do you wish that more builders understood a little bit more?
Yeah. I think it definitely changes with companies, but GTM moments are like very big moments that need to be pre-planned, and you only get a few. So I would just say be like very careful and thorough in planning those, coordinating with partners. Like you're only going to make so much noise, both in terms of kind of like big moments, but also just in terms of getting up in the algorithm. Like you need to have people teed up, and the more parties you're dealing with, the more planning that requires in terms of like coordinating people to announce at the same time, making sure there are no hiccups. So I would say a lot of it is really just like marketing communications are arguably some of the most important aspects of any go-to-market, and making sure you have like enough lead time for a lot of partners to get on board and do the proper work to pre-plan. Like it's much better, in my opinion, to have like 3 really good go-to-market moments than like kind of a spray of 10, some of which kind of like fall a little flat.
No, agreed. I mean, this is just like my own personal follow-up question, just off the riff. But I mean, when it comes to like marketing in DeFi, what do you feel has like worked the most, especially with new projects or builders? Because I know that's always just been a pain point in crypto or in Web3 in general, especially because we're a very like, or have been a very technical heavy community. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I think there are 2 big things, and this was like a lot of advice that we gave like to our portfolio, especially of early stage projects. One is don't underestimate how important founder-led marketing is. It's important to have like individual brands behind projects, people that are like individually trusted, kind of like loud, trusted voices on Twitter. I mean, I would ask anyone to name one major DeFi project that doesn't have like a pretty loud voice behind it in terms of like a founder or a C-suite level person. And those people did not start off as like big Twitter personalities. Like it's important to kind of have like a human behind the brand. It's very important to like build that in parallel. And I've seen a lot of companies kind of need to play catch up a little bit further down the road where like things start growing, the founder doesn't have an individual brand, and there's kind of like a scramble to get them kind of like at par with the level of the brand of the project. And then second, just keep things as simple as possible. I think crypto is like a very complex space with a lot of moving parts. Really think about like, for every announcement, is there anything you can exclude, parse out? Is every piece of information absolutely critical? Can we simplify things? Using like really broad kind of like, like easy to digest frameworks are extremely important. I think, whenever you work at a project, a VC or an early stage founder, you're just so much more in the weeds than like the average user of a lot of these products. So it's really important to think through like who your audience is, like what their level of understanding is, and how to like really market it accurately to them. Like another trapdoor that I saw a lot of founders fall in from like a variant perspective, which this is different. Like I'm not talking about developer products, I'm talking about consumer ones. It's kind of like marketing it to themselves and their friends who are not kind of like the target demographic like of most of these products.
Right. No, that's very helpful. So what I did gather from that, or just like one highlight piece that I want to note is for all the builders that are listening, get active on Twitter.
Yeah.
And absolutely. There was a follow-up question. I'm going to pop this question back up just so you know the follow-up question. But Victor also did ask, so will it be an accelerator model or close to the super team approach in terms of the cohort of founders that you're supporting?
Honestly, still being figured out. So I mean, I'm like quite ready to answer it. It honestly depends on sort of like what level of interest we have. We have like a high bar for teams that we want to work with. And if there's enough, I think we'll do like a big cohort. If not, in terms of not necessarily, we wouldn't do anything like formal accelerator like. It could be something similar to like a fellowship or like broader education program. I want to make sure it's like there's like a good level of mentorship, a lot of connectivity to labs. If it's a more formal program, if the number of teams is smaller, it'll probably just be kind of like close direct relationships with the entire team.
Yeah. Well, that kind of helps me guide my next question. But well, as you are evaluating potential partners, what signals tell you that a team is mission aligned?
Yeah. The big one back to the beginning is like it's someone's life work and they're really looking at this through kind of a multi-year lens instead of just kind of like a short, quick project. And I think how you see that is less of a focus on, like grants, incentives, kind of the more kind of like tactical components, and more so like product vision, building out product protocol, things like that, having your like multi-year strategy planning, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also another pretty good question in the audience that we got on this topic, but CCA is really interesting. Can you touch on what the plan is at Uniswap for helping devs and project experiment with CCA, and what have you seen built so far?
Awesome. Very glad somebody asked this question. So yeah, CCA is for people in the audience not necessarily familiar, the new liquidity launchpad protocol. It was released by Labs a few weeks ago. Are doing an initial sale with Aztec, which is going quite well and has been really exciting. Going forward, there's two ways to collaborate on CCAs, which like I'm working closely with a few projects on. One, which I would argue is like the more interesting one in my opinion, is CCA is like a generalizable protocol that anyone can build on top of. There's interesting opportunities for front ends to basically leverage CCAs under the hood, which is a more fair, transparent on-chain auction. The easy mental model for it is instead of having like a strict bonding curve or kind of like more of kind of like a back-weighted auction where a lot of people come in at the end and snipe, CCA kind of like smooths bids over a long period of time. And the game theory of that is it like kind of compels a lot of people to bid a little bit earlier and allows kind of like a broader set of participants to get into the auction. And there are interesting statistics that we'll be sharing after the Aztec sale. But that was quite interesting in terms of like the amount of sniping, kind of like large bidders that came into that compared to other sales, especially, what's the point of an on-chain sale? It's like wide distribution to like a large part of your community, not supposed to be, like a few bots that snipe most of the sale and get like too much of the token supply because the mech design didn't necessarily work. So that's why I think like alternative front ends are really interesting. The protocol is also designed to be very flexible, customizable if people want to add in like their own hooks. And importantly, all liquidity then siphons off to a Uniswap V4 pool where it'll be available on like Uniswap app front ends and anyone that integrates like the Uniswap API and Uniswap protocol. So the distribution play is quite interesting, kind of like post-launch in terms of where liquidity goes. So that's one way to work with us, like building products on top of CCAs. The second that's also really interesting is like thinking about like going through a CCA auction yourself. Q1, we're looking to work pretty closely with a few projects very similar to Aztec that are interested in going through an auction process. So if you're interested in that, I would just say reach out. We're having a lot of active conversations right now with some really interesting projects. So that's very much in motion if people are interested.
Yeah. Aztec, well, speaking of Aztec, actually, privacy is generating significant buzz in 2025. So what is Uniswap's stance on privacy, and How are y'all incentivizing builders to integrate privacy into their ecosystem? I think you kind of touched on this, but if we could expand a little bit.
Yeah, so we have a private mempool, which is quite unique. So, I mean, that definitely helps in terms of map protection. That's like one layer of privacy from a technical perspective that we have on Unichain. Outside of that, as of now, there are no immediate plans to have like fully private transactions or anything. But and what we like about the combination of Unichain plus UniV4 hooks, and like really kind of like the driving thinking behind V4 is this like very flexible new developer platform in a way where if people want to build private pools, that's something you can very easily do with kind of like a new kind of hook. Like Unichain from a technical perspective, like optimized for trading, you can definitely like kind of hook in interesting other infrastructure there. If there's any kind of private transactions that you want to run. So it's something that like we are not actively developing as a team, but if other people in the ecosystem are interested in developing, and I think it's a large opportunity both on Unichain and for other deployments of V4.
No, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing. I know privacy has been like, or especially after coming from Dev Connect, I'm not sure if you were at Dev Connect, but it was like the number one like hot topic. I mean, this is just now my like personal question out of curiosity. Going into 2026, do you think we're going to see privacy continue to be like the star of the show, or what trends would you foresee, especially when it comes to DeFi, that builders could look into?
Yeah, great question. I mean, privacy definitely has a lot of momentum. I think it's like I definitely it's a very difficult technical challenge. I've spent a lot of time on the category variant, and like there have been major strides recently that have garnered a lot of excitement. There's still quite a few leaps before we have like a fully private blockchain or anything that's at the level of performance of any of the major L2s. So I mean, Aztec is definitely kind of like the leading player there.
Right.
And very excited about them. But there's definitely some like big technical hurdles that need to be jumped through. And you know, the team at Aztec is amazing, and like they've worked through kind of this massive, very difficult technical problem over a number of years to get to the point where they are today. Yeah. So that's quite exciting. I think like one other big category is like there's definitely been a lot of renewed interest in RWAs, which you've seen announcements from like an institutional perspective. So that's quite exciting, kind of like more sustainable on-chain yields. I think, yeah, the CEO of BlackRock the other day said something like all assets will be tokenized in 2 years, which, you know, is pretty aggressive. But there's definitely more and more interest, I would say, from kind of the higher level institutional space, which is quite exciting. So I think like privacy and RWAs will be very forefront Q1.
Yeah, that's good to know. And then I have another question, also just coming off of Dev Connect and seeing that, I mean, outside of DeFi, there's a big boom on like creator coins and like prediction markets. I just want to get your own personal hot take on how you feel about that in general, or in just seeing projects, like a boom of projects like surrounding creator coins and prediction markets.
Yeah. I mean, prediction markets are definitely another really popular category. I would say, you know, Polymarket arguably was one of the first crypto apps to really break into the mainstream, where it was being quoted on, you know, like CNN, like using a lot of pop culture shows. And I think leverages the market creation aspect of crypto, which is very interesting. That, you know, anyone can go in with sort of like a transparent prediction market, create it, and you're seeing like a lot of other early stage startups in that space. As I was leaving VC, that was arguably the hottest category over the summer.
Right.
I think prediction markets will continue to grow. You know, that's very exciting. And then from a creator coin perspective, I mean, I kind of mentioned it before. I think like very interesting, and I, you know, would love for more of that activity to come to Unichain. Definitely a bit more ephemeral, and not necessarily like too sustainable. A lot of tokens kind of like have their moment and then fizzle out for a bit, but you always have a few that stay for quite a bit. And I do think like broadly through the lens of tokenization, you know, eating up large parts of the world, more and more people will see this as like a means of raising funds, kind of promoting their own personal brand, etc.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know I've got, well, probably off the record, just a lot of conflicting thoughts about creator coins, but I'm definitely seeing prediction markets.
Polarizing topic.
But okay, so back to just like my general flow of questions. I would say like, I mean, for builders entering like Unichain or any new ecosystem, what is the biggest misconception that you're seeing from like any new builders in DeFi, and how do you guys guide them through that at Unichain?
Yeah, I think one big misconception is, there are like a lot of new chains that kind of arguably have like low-hanging fruit, no one that's built X. I think generally there's this impression of, you know, like a good example on Unichain is like perps, like
Mhm.
major category across most chains, like very DeFi trading aligned. But I don't think like taking, like forking a perps protocol from another chain, just deploying it under like your own brand is going to be terribly successful. I think there's this general conception of like, oh, if there's low hanging fruit in an ecosystem, we can kind of just like launch it ourselves and it'll be successful. If you look across most major chains, either what happens is the original protocol, if it becomes large enough, deploys and eats all the liquidity and volume,
Mhm.
or it's like a new player moves in that does something kind of like truly net new and establishes itself in the ecosystem, which is like the best path forward on a new L2, in my opinion. So I think like, an important design consideration is you should be doing something that's kind of like leans on unique capabilities of the chain from a technical perspective, isn't like entirely, like the same, just like a fork of a protocol in another ecosystem. You need to do
Mhm.
something that's like a little net new, exciting, and leans into the chain itself. Just because they're hurdle to get over for, like there are a lot of Uniswap forks out there. Just doing that in a new ecosystem is so low that a lot of people are going to do it. And it's not really going to be like a key source of differentiation, even if you're first.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as we're kind of getting towards the final questions or final two questions, also just want to remind everyone, if you do have any other questions in the audience, feel free to hit the chat before we do close this up. But I know you mentioned this earlier in terms of like what projects you're hoping to see more on Unichain, but if we could expand on that a little bit just
Yeah.
to, what are you expecting or hoping to see more of?
Yeah, I think two big categories I'm particularly excited about. I mean, I just mentioned this one, but perps I think is a massive opportunity for multiple reasons. I think like the yield infrastructure base is being built out. Interesting things you can do there in terms of hedging. There's already a lot of trading activity from a spot perspective. If people want to hedge, their access like there's clear demand for perps from kind of a broad portfolio management yield strategy perspective. But along with that, I think it is just a good chain for a perp trading protocol. Like some of the lowest some of the lowest block times in gas fees in market, which for
Mhm.
perp trading are extremely important. You're dealing with like much higher frequency activity than you see on spot typically. Um, so that's a category that I'm particularly excited about. And then on the yield infrastructure side, I think there's still quite a bit that can be built out there in terms of new strategies. And yeah, I think those are like personally the two categories I'm most excited about.
Yeah, awesome. And well, my final question is if you can, and you might need to take some time to think about this, but if you could narrow it down to like three key essential pieces of advice for builders that are either building in Uniswap V4, participating in UHI cohort 7 or previous cohorts, yeah, give me like three key essential pieces of advice for coming from like a VC perspective.
Definitely.
Got anything?
Yeah, I think like one important one is always think big. Like, what are big markets you can go after? I think a lot of people fall into the trap of getting very excited about like net new mech design and a cool new protocol, but drift into a smaller market niche versus like I thinking big, here's like a massive category that I have conviction in, like perps on Unichain and like attacking that versus like you shouldn't go after like a tiny slice of that market. So always think big. I think that's a very important piece of advice. Second, like always push the boundary in terms of like a new protocol product vision. Like if you look, like the history of the most successful apps in crypto, none of them have done anything that was like remotely like others in the market before. You do need to like think of first principles, like really push yourself to the idea maze. How do you do something that's truly net new? I think that's number two. And then number three on the go to market front, I would just say be like very, very tactical and pre-planned and have like big go-to-market moments planned. Like the most noise from projects is definitely the ones that have like very clear go-to-market marketing roadmaps, work with a lot of partners, kind of like lean on as much distribution as possible, and that just requires planning. Like I would say, like be think of go-to-market moments in terms of you having kind of like a few like shots, a few beats, and be like very deliberate about where you spend a lot of those resources and attention.
Yeah. I know you'd mentioned something earlier about like you only get three go-to-market moments or you get very few go-to-market moments. So you got
Yeah,
to do.
per like quarter or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can only like once again, I'm talking it mostly through social channels, but if you're trying to like fill up space in the room, you can't do that every other day. You need to be very deliberate in terms of like coordinating the resources that you need behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, outside of socials, sorry, but this is just my final question. But like, outside of socials, like, what other go-to-market channels or strategies do you feel are, I guess, most lucrative?
Yeah, socials are definitely most helpful in crypto. I mean, the other ones, it like definitely varies by the project. You can do interesting things on like the SEO front, paid ads, like general content marketing with like press releases. But I mean, if I'm being honest, I do really think like in crypto specifically, socials are probably the most effective channel. It's just what most people in the industry are constantly on. If you're a new app, your base of users is going to be people that are pretty DeFi native and willing to experiment with new things, and they're all on Twitter. Just keep it simple. Just use that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like in the same way that I personally just associate Aztec with privacy now, just because of how well they've done with branding. But I mean, are there any other projects that you think are really like nailing it right now in on socials when it comes to DeFi?
And obviously Uniswap, I think. And I'm trying to, in terms of a new one, trying to think. It's a bit of a tough one. I mean, I think most of the major projects are doing quite a good job. I'm trying to think of like a new kind of upcomer that's done a good job recently.
I know, I'm actually am too.
Yeah.
But Uniswap is the best. We
Let
can.
me get back to you on that one.
I'm good with that answer.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that could be upset with what I say.
Yeah, let's keep it there. Well, awesome. Oh, sorry. I want to make sure I get to every comment, but of course, yeah. What about conferences as a distribution channel? Of course, in my opinion, it does require a lot of funds. But do you have any closing thoughts on that?
I think if you're doing a more developer-facing product, extremely important. You'll have like a big mass of people around. So from a chain perspective, we spend a lot of time at conferences. If you're more user-facing, not that helpful. I think it's more helpful in terms of kind of like pushing ideas forward. Like I always come out of conferences very excited about like new trends in the industry. Like it pushes my thinking to like bounce ideas off of other people. But you're not gonna like grow your user base just talking a lot about your project or buying a booth at a conference, in my opinion. I think it'd be effective down the road just for brand presence, but for initial go-to-market, it's just, it will definitely help. It's just relative to like the amount of resources and time you need to pour into it. I'd just say like lean more heavily on socials.
Yeah, I know my personal take on that is I have seen a lot of like, I guess like new protocols and folks just pulling up to like the ETH Global hackathons and or signing up to, I mean, this is my own like hack that I've seen, but like folks are signing up to participate in the hackathons, but they're actually on the floor connecting with builders. And I think that's a cool low budget way to connect, but awesome. Thanks for asking. All right. Well, to close things out, thank you so much for taking the time and
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you had shared this, but yeah, what would be, I'll pop the screen back up, but would this be the best way for folks who are interested in getting involved in Unichain to connect?
Yeah, Twitter is great. If you just want to shoot me a DM there, I check them daily. So yeah, reach out to me there. Email, a bit old fashioned, but also put it there if people prefer.
Yeah, we like Twitter. Perfect. Well, thank you again. And I just want to give a quick note. If you are a builder and you're looking to join us in our next Uniswap Hook Incubator Cohort 8, applications are now open. The application deadline is January the 4th, and the next cohort is going to be starting on January the 15th. If you're currently participating in UHI Cohort 7, as a reminder, and you all probably know this already, but the hookathon ends next Thursday, December the 11th. And we will be hosting Demo Day on Friday, December 19th. So good luck to everyone in UHI Cohort 7. And yeah, if you are interested in participating in Cohort 8, you can hit the link in our Twitter bio. And yeah, good luck to everyone. And thank you again, Derek, so much for sharing. And really excited to see what's good with Unichain next.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Peace. All right, closing screen.